Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio. We are here in our program, What is Spiritism? What is Spiritism? Is a program that was and is dedicated to stimulate our study about Kardec's books and the foundation of it all. Did you know that Kardec wrote this book, What is Spiritism, with the intention of summarizing the basic sets of principles in Spiritism. But in the first part of it, as an educator, in a very Socratic, the method, asking questions, addressing the questions, he leads us into understanding, one, what Spiritism is. Two, he leads us into knowing how to talk with people of different walks of life, especially those who are skeptics, who are disbelievers. Talking about disbelievers, we're going to talk about it today. It's those who cannot see in order to be convinced, and more. And we are here with two friends, scholars in Spiritism. And when I say scholars, I mean people who are committed to studying Spiritism, who are committed to practicing the teachings of Spiritism. And we are all in different countries. It's going to be the United States here with us at Kardec Radio, and then the extension there in France and also in the UK, in London, UK. Our friend Faye Waddington is here with us. Thank you, Faye, for joining us. Just saying that Faye is part of the Spiritist Society of London. So if you're passing by, find a way to communicate with them, to stop by at the meeting. And Faye is also one of the hosts of a program here at Kardec Radio, right, Faye?
Yes, that's great. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much
It's an
for
honor to be
joining.
here.
Thank you, Faye. We are really looking forward to hearing from you on the breakdown of what Kardec is bringing to us. And also we have here with us Charles Kempf, our friend from France. Thank you, Charles, for being here with us. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Hope the same for you, Vanessa and Faye, and for all the listeners. Thank you so much for having me again in this series about what is Spiritism.
And Charles is also one of the hosts of the program Spiritual Light here at Kardec Radio every Wednesday.
Yes.
So people know you. They've been following the programs. And on our side, I have to say thank you for Faye and Charles for taking their time at this time in your country, because I know it's bedtime, and we apologize that we couldn't do any better, but we're all thankful to the both
It's
of you.
fine.
No problem.
No problem.
So Kardec in the What Spiritism talks to a visitor that has a hard time being convinced because he can't see the phenomena. Faye, what part of this dialogue did really impact you mostly?
Well, it's a very interesting and enlightening dialogue, but and especially when he talks of when he mentions disbelievers, I thought the first thing was to make the distinction between the one who doesn't believe because it's in another different frame of mind and he hasn't had the opportunity to see it differently. But I think he is mentioning is concentrating on the ones who refuse to see before the evidence. And that as well, and this is a different set of mind. It's a different intention. And it was very interesting to say, I was very interested to see how he would describe the way that people expect the world or things or circumstances to conform to their expectations, as if they could summon or command the spiritual world as and it doesn't really run like that.
Yeah.
No.
And isn't that interesting that nowadays, with so much distraction in our lives, if someone expects to see to believe, we're so distracted that we won't see much. So it's going to be even harder to believe anything, don't you think, Charles?
Exactly. I mean, everything is diluted so much. Huh? And interestingly, when we look what Kardec wrote of how he discovered these phenomenon himself in the posthumous works, he was also a disbeliever before. When his friends came and told him, yeah, the tables are moving, they are even answering questions he said, oh, stop. This I will only believe if you demonstrate me that the table has a brain and whatsoever. But then he was disbelieving, of course. But another day, they invited him, if you want, you can come and participate to see yourself. And he went there. And the first session, he could see, he could check, verify that there was no trick, no magic, nothing, that the phenomenon was authentical. And uh, immediately he detected there is something serious behind this, and this is what I will investigate from now on. So he went there disbelieving, so it was not necessary to have faith to go there and to believe, but he went there with good faith. He had no preconceived ideas. He was disbelieving, but he had the correct scientific approach, which is let's stay open, see, and push all the consequences out of it after having seen. So he was of good faith, because what happens a lot, and I have seen this so many times, a lot of people come and say, no, I want to see a phenomenon before I believe. Generally, these people who are claiming this, after having seen the phenomenon, they still do not believe. I have, when I arrived in France in the early 90s, there was a group which were moving tables and so on. So when I from the time I learned Spiritism, I knew Spiritism in Brazil. I never saw a table moving, And there I could see it for the first time. I didn't need it because I was believing already it would move. So many people spoke about it, trustable people like Kardec, Dolan, or whoever else. Crooks and everything. And one person came and said, I want to see because otherwise I don't believe. So I called this guy responsible of that meeting and asked him, hey, there is someone here want to see. Come over, bring her here, we will show her. And it was so, the table was moving in a way, I mean, putting the feet of the table inside the feet of the chair there where the person was sitting. I was securing myself from laughing. So authentic and so strong was the phenomenon. What was the reaction of the people? No, they were pushing the table, they left, they had tricks, whatever. So don't lose much time with people like this, because what is lacking in faith is the good faith and the scientific neutrality, openness, not to believe in anything, that's sure, analyze and study long time, but without preconceived ideas.
It's so interesting you're saying this because Kardec says one must wait for the goodwill of the spirits to communicate. It's that message that Chico Xavier said to everybody. It doesn't depend on me. The phone rings from them to us, right, Faye?
Yes, that's right. It's this is all from what you're both saying is that in the scientific process, if you start an investigation in the scientific approach, this means that there is a will to reach to a conclusion, to test and analyze and accept the fact, accept the conclusion. Because, mind you, if anyone who's wanted to investigate and start the studies on electricity, and the moment that they get the first light bulb and you negate that, you deny it. No, this is not light. This is not happening. That's my imagination. How can it be your imagination? You've got the whole physical process and the physical result, measurable, documented, and denying that, it's a bit like denying that light. You can't switch a light on if you put it into circuit.
Yes.
And so I think what Kardec was saying is, well, you start the scientific process with goodwill, because even if you start from non-belief in it, but I want to investigate to see if there's anything that. But as soon as I find the facts, it's my ethical position to accept the facts. Otherwise, stop the investigation. It makes no sense.
It's so interesting because Kardec, as you said, like he's reminding us of the nature of the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
As he says, it's in nature, and he compares to scientists who go in nature, watch and wait. If I am watching how birds behave, I cannot control how they're going to behave. I have to keep watching patiently to pay attention. And this is something that caught my attention because we're living in a world where people rarely have a quiet moment.
Mm-hmm.
And they rarely appreciate silence. And I remember a book that was written by Thich Nhat Hanh on silence, the importance of silence, and people do not cherish it much until a certain age. But then life has already passed for so long.
Yeah.
To observe it, we need to have a quiet moment to reflect, to pick up on it. It's about perception, don't you think? It's about how do you refine or amplify the scope of your perception, not only to see the phenomenon, but to understand what is happening. You don't need to be an ostensible medium to come across spiritist phenomenon. There are so, as Kardec says in the Medium's book, there is a huge, there are so many types of mediumship. We cannot say it's only one, and everybody's a medium in some way or form. You can perceive in yourself, you can perceive in others, right?
Yeah, when you said about the silence, I think I totally agree. What silence does, it allows time for sensitivity to speak, for perception to speak. This amount of this chain of noise of all sorts is a sort of a denial, is an attempt to damp perception. Because in all the noise, all we get is input, and with very little time to process or even to express and offer an output.
Yes.
Silence is a time when everything from within surfaces, isn't it?
Right. And as Charles said, we need good faith, as Kardec says, and many people they are present at the moment of the phenomenon. Like, for example, in the book 2000 Years Ago, Emmanuel describes how the senator Publius Lentulus 2000 years ago saw the Christ, talked to the Christ, he mentioned about the daughter, and yet he goes home and he denies the healing of his daughter. So he says that's why we should avoid them and not want to waste any time on them. You know, I have to confess, I love how Kardec is so straightforward. I love it, you know. Don't you think, Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. Because some people, with preconceived ideas and which are not ready to change their mind, which are change resistant, as we say. If you show them, if you put them a spotlight on their face, they will simply be blinded. They will not see anything, and they will block in their position. The right scientist position is, as per when you study epistemology and philosophy of science, like Lakatos or Thomas Kuhn. A scientific law is only true up to the point someone demonstrates it is false. So the scientist should be at any moment ready to reconsider what he considers as be a truth, because we are only discovering the laws of nature little by little. And what we think being true at one moment may be false or incomplete or wrong in some later, or in like how to say the relativity law compared with the classic mechanics of Newton. Newton, okay, you are right, but in certain conditions, when you come closer to the sun or whatever, the laws are not enough anymore to describe what happens. And the new law did not substitute totally, but completed the old one. And a scientist must always be humble and ready to reconsider. And the people who are with excessive pride, to think that they have all the truths, not following what who was it who said, the only thing I know is that I don't know anything. I don't remember. There is a singer in France who is singing that, but I think it exists in English as well. This is what we need to be ready, open for change, not to believe in anything, because that's another. You see, the two extremes. Extreme credulity and absolute incredulity. And both extremes are wrong. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. So to analyze everything with care, not believing in anything, particularly today with all these fake news that are reaching us and people saying that the earth is not round but it's flat or whatever. I mean, if you believe whatever you see, you get crazy. No. You have to use your common sense, analyze everything, and make the difference. But this was exactly the mindset of Kardec. He saw the tables. He saw that there is no tricks. He has seen that there are some answers. He observed more and more and more during a lot of time. 2 years later only, he published the first Spirits book, and it took the whole investigation took something like 15 years to reach the level of the Spiritist body of knowledge we have today. But he was open to consider everything, and even to go very far to all the possible consequences which are coming out of this phenomenon. Yes, the spirit exists. We have a soul. Yes, this soul is surviving after the death. It can communicate with us. So what are the philosophical consequences out of it? And he is still today criticized for this. No, he went so far in the consequences without even being sure about the basis. The people are questioning again. I'm not sure we have a soul, So, okay, they do not look to the consistencies. They just stay to a kind of a blocked position in the materialist paradigm.
Yeah, that's what later on Gabriel Deland said as well, and he was very emphatic in that respect as well. We have to be first and foremost forward-thinking. and honest in that thought, and honest in what we pursue and we want to find out. And he says, well, this is what I believe, but I know things are changing, and I believe there is things naturally evolve. It would be strange to think otherwise. And I'm ready to prepare whatever comes from this evolution, if it's proven through a method. So we're not made to cling on to something for safety, like a life buoy, cling on to it because I'm afraid of moving on. Why would be afraid to move on?
Yeah. It's so interesting because Kardec says clearly to us, and I say this because nowadays we have social media, we have quick forms of communication, and sometimes people are very casual and they talk about things that they don't know, or they just discard it without actually researching.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is on the click of a button. So to understand the Spiritist science, you need time, reflection, goodwill, as Kardec says, good faith. And if we're simply hardened skeptics, he says to us, avoid them. Avoid means leave them alone. Let them be. Some people come to us sometimes in our families, but they don't mean to actually know. They just say, what do you think? Wow, but what? You just leave them alone. We don't waste time, not because if they are willing to understand. That's what Kardec has been saying throughout the chapters, time and again. He says, we only invest our time on those who are sincerely willing to learn. If they are not, why we're going to waste our time, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're not in the mission to turn people's minds against their will. It's a matter of profound respect to free will.
Exactly.
And
We
knowing also that one day they will come, they will understand. They are not mature, they are not ready yet,
now.
but one day they will be. So
Yeah.
just a question to leave them the time necessary for them to mature, to accept the change.
It's beautiful.
The biggest thing is the change resistance. But today you go everywhere. You see, you talk about silence. When we do brainstorming, for instance, we have to put us in conditions, openness needed for having new ideas, finding the disrupting game changer, and so on. And for this, you need to be open to the change. If you are not open to the change, you will not evolve. If you do not change, you will not improve. You will stay stationary. So it's absolutely anti-scientific and also against any type of progress. So the openness to change is really a must, and this has to be observed by each one, because this is know thyself. We must know us ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Would you say that it occurs to me? So I felt like asking you that sometimes people they find their safety. They feel safe in one set of belief, and that because that resonates with another group, so they feel accepted by the group, and might be afraid of moving on because afraid of not being accepted so much. So there's this fear, a fear of being wrong for just trying to think differently.
You're right. I agree with you. I think Charles is coming back because it's raining in France. So maybe that's why we lost the connection. But as you're saying that, Faye, it reminds me of the next moment in the dialogue when Kardec was asked by this visitor, well, don't the spirits want people to believe that they exist? Why don't they employ extra efforts to do it. And the answer is fascinating because he's teaching us here. He says, these spirits, they see, think, and act according to other perspectives. Whereas our sight is circumscribed by matter, limited by the narrow circle in which we find ourselves, spirits embrace the whole. Time, which seems so long for us, is only an instant for them.
Yeah.
Distance is only a stop. He goes on, and he says that the spirits, the higher spirits, are willing to help us, but they can't enforce, impose. And this is something that some people don't understand, that the higher you go, the less impositional you are, the more understanding you become, the farther ahead you see. Like Charles was saying to us, it just so happens that we know that at some point this person will shift gears in their paradigm of life. It's just a matter of time. So I don't need to be in despair. Faye, how many people do we know who go desperate because they want their family members, their friends to understand Spiritism? And they start imposing. Then
Yeah.
people become, distant, right?
Yeah, because there is in history a tradition of an imposed acceptance. Either you believe it or else,
Yeah.
believe it, or I won't like you that much, or you won't be regarded as highly, or you won't be thought of as clever or worthy of our love and our attention. When what Kardec is saying is just the opposite. We're all worthy of the time and the place and what we've achieved. And just as a huge school, just as people go to schools and the school replicates this learning process and evolution, isn't it? There will be a time for everything and a time for each idea to be understood and taken on board, lived, so that it makes sense, so that its purpose is understood. It's understand something and then accept it because it becomes natural.
And
not try to swallow something unnaturally and hope that it was going to work. It won't. It will be a poison to system rather than soothing.
And it's interesting, in nature in itself gives time for everything, right? So it's a matter of us giving time to those who are still, disbelieving it or doubting it or even denying it. At the end of the day, if we're truly convinced about it, we shouldn't in any moment be desperate, because people have the right time to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
A flower is different from another flower, fruit from another fruit, a tree from another. We should also give people time to be who they are. And I tell to those who are family members, whose family members are skeptical, I say, look, who knows if we were the ones who convinced them in a previous life not to believe any of this.
Yes.
And now we are the ones who have to stimulate them, right?
Yes.
Don't you?
That's correct. Yes. And it occurs to me that also, you see how that this is a perfect formula to live outside this made up stress and having to conform, having to accept. We don't have to conform. We don't have to accept in the sense that we end up accepting what feels right, what
Yes.
makes sense, what leads on, what shows the way forward. So, like I said, well, people would be anxious because their siblings or the relatives do not think, are not in the same frame of mind. Who's to say that my frame of mind is better than theirs? Maybe they have a more deeper, more profound understanding of what is here in this book, even if they don't take themselves, they don't classify themselves, or I belong to group A or B. So I'm learning with the book, I'm learning with Kardec, of course, but he is telling me, learn with everyone, learn with everything, and study and learn more.
I love what you said, because nowadays people have a hard time studying. We just absorb information out of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever it is, and
Yes.
people just take it as the truth, and it's an illusion. At the end of the day, we went through the whole day browsing through, not necessarily thinking, reflecting, or reading. It's mostly watching, it's mostly pictures or videos,
Yeah.
and we're losing touch of the need to stay calm and quiet, read, reflect.
Yeah, in those terms, we download more than upload.
Yes, you're
So,
right.
what is it? What is it that we can, that we are ready to upload? Means to return to this universe, return in experience, in knowledge, in the things, in conclusions.
So, Faye, since it's only the two of us, because Charles is having a hard time coming back, do
Yeah.
you mind if I ask you, did you go through this phase of not believing and then you believe? How was it for you to encounter Spiritism?
Yes. Well, I did because as a kid, my first schooling, education, was extremely rigid within the Iberian Catholic mind,
Okay,
right? So there were Catholic nuns.
okay.
And in that particular group, we were told more to accept than think. We're actually thinking wasn't very welcome. Acceptance was the rule. And about anything towards outside, anything, especially spiritist, or anything towards spiritism or spiritualism, was banned and labeled as demonic. So we were taught to hate it. Yeah, literally. Because, no, just as you wouldn't accept anything that will be harmful to your life, that idea you take it's harmful. And as a kid, things didn't make sense to me. And when I was 14, I already had my questions. Things didn't match. I have my sensitivity. I had relatives and people who had thought differently. And one day I went to a chapel, and I thought I was going to have, as a kid, to have a little chat with God. And I said, "Excuse me, I love you, but I don't like what I see here. maybe I'm not good for you.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to find my way. And so I left. I officially, in my heart, I left that system and started to look for things that made sense. And I was naturally guided. Well, I had relatives that were spiritists. I was naturally guided. And when I first got to the Spiritist Federation group in Sao Paulo, I stepped in, spoke to a few people, and I felt totally at home because it made sense. So I got back home and told my parents I found home.
Oh, wow. And what was their reaction?
They loved it because they also did. Nobody was ever. They were trying to give me the best education that they could. They never imposed anything. They were profoundly religious, I think, in the most beautiful sense of it, without any link to any ritualistic. It's just the connection to God, the connection to life, the respect for life, and the beauty in everything, that sort of thing. And living a very hard, simple life, but full of appreciation for for life. And so I was gradually offered books to read, and the Gospel according to Spiritism, and yes, because one of my aunts was a wonderful, caring medium, and she became my mentor in that sense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And now in England, as you are there and you're part of the efforts in Spiritism, you encounter often, right? Do you often encounter, I'm assuming, but I shouldn't assume, people who are skeptical, who are resistant?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah. And that stems, I think, from a fear that was similar to the one that I was taught.
Oh.
The ones that comes from groups that, well, that if they've, and then what seemed to me was that it doesn't matter if the essence of this appreciation, this love of life, and the understanding of creation. So I would say this deeper religious sentiment can make people do wonderful things, regardless of the groups where they are. So they'll be the best that they can, and they'll make a difference, and will live a more spiritualized life wherever they are, because maybe that's where they're meant to be.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes it may be more ready to ask questions or to talk about our way of seeing things. Sometimes not so much, and it's down to me to observe if they are ready, if it's a welcome conversation at that point, and how much is this. So you have to be carefully respecting their the cultural inheritance and their upbringing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Kardec says that the spirits, of course, he's talking about the higher spirits, they appreciate people who are diligent and conscientious observers.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is that when they see that people are in goodwill to understand, to reflect upon, they multiply, the good spirits multiply the sources of enlightenment
Mm-hmm.
for them. You participate in mediumistic meetings, right?
Yeah, I do.
And isn't that what we see most often? The good spirits like willing to teach those who are willing to learn?
Yes, and in our particular case, which is the work that we do with Shaz, um, we are there as a rescue group with people who are still looking for answers. People who passed on um, with a question, or they were trapped in their thoughts, trapped in their doubts, in their fears, in their loneliness, and the first thing they said, "What is this? Where am I? Why am I here? What can you tell me?" Because they lack the link, they lack an answer that makes sense, and they will reason, like anyone, like you and me or any other person. They are real people who will bring whatever it is that they had, whatever notions that they had, and they will argue and reason because they want to understand. But then when they learn that, they say, look, there's no need to feel like that anymore. There's no need to feel that guilt because, life goes on. There are other chances. There's a different perspective. And the moment that they feel that there is a perspective, then you see a transformation. There is a relief, and there is a gratitude, a deep gratitude, deeply emotional, because up to that point they thought, there's nowhere to go. I'm stuck here in this place, and I don't think there's anywhere to go. And how am I going to put right what I know I've done wrong?
So this is what we are saying. It's so interesting. Kardec is not touching the subject per se that deep at this passage, but we want to tell people what you're saying.
But they are.
This phenomenon are also to heal people, to
Yes.
counsel them, because many people think communication with the spirits is all about either entertainment or curiosity or asking questions. No, many times it's about rescue work, as you're saying.
And finding disbelievers, many of them, and it's only that they are, and they are, but they are still disbelievers because they didn't find the link. They never found an answer, anything that made sense. But then they can see they talk and they chat in very practical terms, reporting to their experience up to that point and to what's the moment where they are. And they see that it's a very concrete thing. It's not just a flight of imagination. It's a very concrete, plausible possibility.
Yes.
And that's when the belief changes. It becomes from denial into hope and acceptance of something that is making sense.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, Faye, for those who are watching us, Charles probably is not going to come back. So, we want to wrap up the program today.
Mm.
As in this, we're studying the bits of this dialogue between Kardec and the skeptic.
Yes.
These two passages that we studied, Kardec first and foremost recommends that we don't worry about those who are, you know, hardened skeptics. We just leave them alone. Their time is going to come.
Yeah.
And in regards to the spirits, they are willing to spread out the teachings as long as we're diligent and conscientious.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to share as your final comment regarding the way Kardec approaches these scenarios?
Yeah. My eyes just came to this mark here when Kardec is saying, those who want to observe in good faith should not believe without question, but rid themselves of all preconceived ideas and not want to compare incompatible things. They should wait, follow, and observe with tireless patience. The same applies to adherence, since it shows that they haven't arrived at their convictions lightly. So it's a very solid conclusion. What
Yes.
Kardec is saying is that the lesson
Yes.
from that we get, that he imparts to us, is that knowledge to be consolidated takes time, patience, and will.
Yes.
And will.
Time.
Disposition.
Yes. Interesting. So for those who are watching us, we would recommend take your time, read the book What Spiritism,
Mm-hmm.
reflect, study with friends who are alike. If they are not in your same city, you can connect online. You can go to Kardec Radio, watch the programs together, have group discussions, because we grow so much together when we take that
Yeah.
steps. Right, Faye?
Yes, absolutely.
We want to thank you, Faye, and we want to thank Charles. He couldn't come back. It's raining much in France,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Maybe we lost his connection, but we want to invite everyone who's watching us to stay tuned. Next week, we will come back and continue this dialogue between Kardec and the skeptic, and then he's going to talk about the origin of modern Spiritist ideas and much, much more. So thank you,
Yes.
Faye, time and again for your
Very
time,
exciting.
for your great summary too, for your presence, and we thank Charles too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, friends. We wish you many blessings, and we look forward to seeing you next week in another What is Spiritism with Kardec.